Yes, welcome back. This is F a Rap Critic. It's your boy Malik 16, founder and creator of Plates and Crates. And no, my shirt doesn't mean that I'm repping for the simps, son. Sorry, it's corny, but I couldn't avoid it. It was calling me to do it. Shout out to Duct Tape Graphics, part of Mr. Fab's whole dope era, which is real heavy out here in the town, whole Bay Area. But let's keep it Cali for a minute and travel a little down south. Southern California, LA, everywhere from Inglewood to South Central, because we're still going over our review of the 1996 classic album by the West Coast supergroup, Westside Connection, Bow Down. And that's a part of our series of reviewing nothing but albums turning 25 that were released in the year 1996, one of the golden years, my favorite year in hip hop for the rest of the year on this channel. If you have not, go ahead and check out video 1 where we go over category 1, which is the album, the product itself. And of course, while you at it, take a minute to like and subscribe to the channel. With no further ado, this is category 2. We're going over the rap performance on this album. Now, the very first dimension that we go over in category 2 is dimension 1, personality and charisma. That's the question of how much personality and charisma did the three members who comprise this group, Mac 10, Ice Cube, and Dub C, express and get across on this album, and how did they do it, right? So we're talking about three very distinct members and an album that the masses could have expected to be leveraged as Ice Cube saying, these are my proteges, naturally, because Ice Cube had amassed this veteran status, not only as a pioneer for West Coast hip hop, but the pioneer of gangster rap in general. The guy. But it would be almost impossible to leverage this album that way, just because, we talked about the age differentials. They're only 1 year apart in ascending or descending order in age anyway. So we got, men in their mid to late 20s, and while no one had the same rap status, no one had the same success and icon presence as Ice Cube, Dub C could easily boast having the same tenure, because Dub C had started his rap career the same time that Ice Cube did. Been a part of two groups at this point, one being his own group, which was the Mad Circle, consisting of Sir Jinx and DJ Crazy Tunes and Coolio, and this now being his third group. He could easily say, yeah, you might be the icon, the legend, but we've been in the game just as long. So, two areas where that wouldn't have worked the whole protege route. Now you have Mac 10, who was the new jack. He was the rookie to the game. But coming off the success of his own solo debut the year before, which, both the albums from Dub C and the Mad Circle and Mac 10's debut the year prior really set the stage for this album to even come into fruition, because they both boasted two big West Side theme singles with the words West in them that prompted and sparked, the conversations and the murmurs and the talk of the streets in the industry about this whole West Side project. Couple that with this idea that Mac 10 had this street status, this Inglewood street status, that fast-tracked him to be up there on an even tier with Dub C and Ice Cube. Even though he was the new guy to the rap industry, he came in kind of on this boss level that no one really questioned. We'll talk more about that in the next dimension. But you also think about physically, right? Physically and aesthetically, stature-wise, the gentlemen all kind of look like they're on the same level. These are husky individuals, even though they're in their mid-20s to late 20s, compared in contrast to what the rest of the rap game looked like in 1996. When I think of the popular rappers of that era, you have Mobb Deep, Dog Pound, and Tribe Called Quest, even Wu-Tang. Nobody was really sported beards. And then you get these three guys. You got Dub C with his signature 3 braided beard strands, Mac 10 and Ice Cube with, full beards, shaved down. But, together they look more like rap uncles. then, young guys in their 20s, it's hard to think, I don't think people really put it in perspective that Mac 10 and Tupac were the same age within this year when this album came out. So, on this album, they have distinct roles that they guide you through if you don't pick up on them yourself. Instead of pulling rank, what Ice Cube does is remind you of his rap status consistently, whereas Dub C takes the role of the aggressor, and Mac 10 tends to play the cut a little bit more. He's the chill one, he's the bridge between the two, and tends to speak with more the grounded perspective. Out of the three, Mac 10 plays it close to the chest and references things that are really daily based things that are based in daily California life for the scene that they're trying to set. Dub C tends to use the most humor, or intentional humor, I'll say, out of the three of them. Ice Cube, I think he uses the most humor, but I'm not sure that every time it's intentional. I don't know if Ice Cube is always in on the joke. And so Dub C, it's more deliberate. It's evidenced in some of the more playful ways that he'll come in, some of the more playful lines, but it's juxtaposed with him saying and coming off as the most aggressive one. So when you fuse their personalities together, it works because they balance each other out. And the two have no problem playing their role next to Ice Cube. You get this brother element, you get this I ride for my bro, I ride for the team dynamic that's evident throughout the whole project. So even though they're showing their individualism, and there's a lot of distinct things they do that are their calling card there, and we'll talk more about that as we go through. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, which takes us to dimension 2, the suspension of disbelief versus the believability. This is going to be a percentage game for most of you. I don't know if it's 50-50, 60-40, or 70-30, but there's going to be a degree of this album that has to be met with some suspension of disbelief, strictly off of Ice Cube's presence. Because at this point in his career, Ice Cube's Hollywood profile and acting resume was even to his discography at that point, as far as notable films and televised things or things on the screen that you'd seen him in. So that makes it a little harder to believe that he's gonna be the one stepping out the car with the gat like he's telling you he's doing in his songs, believing that he's going to jeopardize his career and the stability of his family for a gangster rap album, right? So he kind of is the impetus for the album and the monkey wrench at the same time, because it already brings some of the all-in quality down. Now on the flip side of that, you get Dub C, who's full flagging throughout this album. There's set claiming all throughout, and he's the only one who directly, reps his gang. He will say Crip on a few spots throughout the album, whereas, Mac 10 reps just as equally and just as hard, but without directly claiming the Bloods. He never uses the word Bloods. He'll say his hood, he's screaming Westside more than anyone else, but Inglewood constantly. Again, I mentioned Dub C being the aggressor, and that is directly related to this guidance that I told you that they kind of put you into as the album goes deeper and deeper. They keep reminding you of the roles that they are playing as members of Westside Connection, the gangster, the killer, and the dope dealer, and they assume these roles accordingly, right? So Dub C being the one who's saying, yeah, I'll be the killer. He's saying lines and things in his raps that are dealing with murder, that are dealing with physical assault. He tends to have the most violently misogynistic lines. He has one particular line about female rappers where it's like, oh, okay. But even his lines about sex are a little aggressive, a little more aggressive than everyone else. And the way he approaches it. Now, where that gets interesting is that Ice Cube makes a whole bunch of bold claims, but because Ice Cube had adopted this fairly newer style to reinvent himself in the mid-90s, there's a difference between how over the top his stuff is and how over the top Dub C stuff is. There's a degree of, Dub C is talking about doing things, the body parts and, ways of physical assault. But there's a twinge of, he might do it. Whereas, Ice Cube's, lines are so animated and over the top. And again, with that suspension of disbelief quality you have to throw in there, it almost seems like, all right, Cube. And, they're coming from this, I'm the Don, I can get you sent up, I can get, he's assuming roles of like mafia characters or things you would see portrayed by mafia characters. He's clever enough to avoid direct initiating of violence type of lines. You'll hear Ice Cube focus mostly on, having money, getting women, and ways that he could either get out of trouble or get you into trouble. But it's seldom that you're gonna hear him start the drama or challenge someone to physical drama. Most of the challenging and boasting, even though he sparks off most of the ish talk in here, it is more in the rap sense, like, challenge my rap status, I'm the Don. And so it's safe, because it could also be argued that this was a chess move by Ice Cube. While he wasn't going to pull rank, what Ice Cube was doing, some would say, it was reestablishing his street cred by, people were questioning him more than ever. While the streets and the masses and the consumers and, the mainstream audience maybe weren't questioning Ice Cube, he was getting questioned more than he has ever been in the industry by this point. Just from other rappers and like by way of all the beefs that we mentioned in category 1. So this would seem like a very masterminded, calculated move, similar to how NWA was formulated, right? Everything down to the aesthetic, the presentation, the look of it, right? I'm wearing the black flag, you wear the red flag, you wear the blue flag, let's stand together. All three of us have the same stature, physically the same presence and demeanor. It worked. It worked for that purpose. It also is like, all right, I get to make all of these bold, boastful, incendiary statements and claims because now I'm backed by two gangs. I'm backed by two gangs. Who gonna check me? Who's really gonna take it further than rap? I can do this now. There's some safety in that. So that could be argued, right? That is a theory. And other than that, gang stuff is all over this album. So these guys are, constantly going at enemies and haters under the guise of this new unity of Westside Connection. They do the same thing that Snoop did with Dog Pound, where they're melding this as this, they're planting a flag as this offshoot of their own gang. They're a rap gang. We don't have to we claim these things individually, but together we are Westside Connect Gang, and we riding on rappers as Westside Connect Gang. We exist as our own island kind of thing. But individually, throughout the album, you're gonna hear Dub C claiming his set repeatedly, and you're gonna hear Mac 10 claiming his hood repeatedly, and then Ice Cube instigating and hyping it all up. In between, Ice Cube says stuff like, oh, the gangs will never die. There's too much love here, even though he's not claiming any set. He's letting them do it. So it always comes down to the question of how much do you believe? And how good a job did they do for the parts where you're supposed to suspend your disbelief? Did you get lost in this album and feel like Ice Cube was going to throw his Hollywood career away to ride on some marks? Something that could sit on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 3, delivery and the use of voice. Now, also by this time in Cube's career, he had adopted this, I say it's newish. You might have saw hints of it on the album, his solo album right prior to this one, but he started assuming this projection from the gut, more of a belly projection, where he was making his words go through loops and hills and valleys, where Ice Cube has always had a snarl. His signature trademark, especially coming into his solo career, was rapping with this snarl. Like, now they got me in the county, right? And we had just gotten used to him rapping in a calmer voice on singles like You Know How We Do It and Today Was a Good Day. So now this new projection of, I'm the king for you guppies, I'm the Don, pushing his words up from the middle, where this came from, I guess this was him trying to embody the aggression that he wanted to come across. A lot of rappers who do aggression based rap come from the throat. Ice Cube was coming from the belly, and you'll hear it on lines like, for the cheese, we want them keys, everybody freeze. The downside to that is that it has this effect of making him seem more like a caricature of gangster, where, his two counterparts were a little bit more, I told you Dub C makes outlandish claims and he uses humor, but when it's time to get in between those bars with lines, he's saying them with a more direct aggression that's a little bit more believable because it's not being projected in this, belly kind of preacher type voice. Ice Cube had turned pastor-like with the way he was projecting. And then, out of all of them, Dub C does more sing-songy kind of cadences, even though there's all a natural melody and bounce to each of the three. I think Ice Cube had the most bounce. Dub C is second with bounce, and then Mac 10 tends to be the one who stays the most in pocket. They all have California twangs, distinctive California twangs. Like, Mac 10's, once again, it's Mac 10, right? And Dub C, the way he pronounces certain things comes out in almost every sentence. The snarl is still there from Ice Cube in those in-between moments, but more often than not, you're getting him projecting with those ups and downs. Now, the strength of each of their voices is on an even tier. Even Mac 10 being the laid-back one, his voice is still as strong, with just a stronger presence. Sometimes he even sounds like Cube on certain tracks that they're on together, especially when they're going back and forth. And then there's the use of sound effects. Dub C, I told you, they all have their arsenal of things they do. Ice Cube with the, Mac 10, again, more than anyone, he's doing the Westside. And, Dub C, down to the way he says, kneel, and here, and, we had a Crip whistle in there. He uses, some other siren type sounds, certain, playing with letter sounds in between words to stretch them out, like connect gang, beady bang, something that you hear Tech 9 do, where, we'll talk about that when we go to the next dimension. So, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to everyone's favorite dimension 4, the flow. Now, an interesting thing happens here. All three of the members, for the majority of the album, rap with a similar rhyme structure. When they're on an even pace, they all catch the beat at the same place. They rap in a simple A-B rhyme scheme where it's straightforward. The bars are gonna land in the same place. And, there's, like I told you, those variations in how they bounce on the beat, but just like their ages ascend or descend by one variant in sequential order, that's kind of how they go with syllable play. Ice Cube uses the least syllables, having more breathing space between his words. Mac 10 would be next up. He fills in those holes just a little bit more than Cube and rhymes the most in pocket. I know I say in pocket and nuance. Every episode I find a reason to say in pocket and nuance. Y'all can laugh at me. And then Dub C, when he's not, following suit and rhyming just like the other two members in those same kind of structures, he uses the most syllables out of the group, and he does this playful thing where he makes the syllables ping pong, and he'll use a lot of syllables in the beginning of a sentence, make them go, zigzag, and then land, and then bring it back with a little bit more of that, and then slow it down again. There's a part on the end of All the Critics in New York where he uses a flow that you hear Tretch from Naughty by Nature use a lot, where it's like the words are running together, but in a fluid way, in a fluid control way. Dub C has the most fluidity out of all three of them because he picks up the most with the syllable packing. But it's distinctively his. It's melodious, and like I said, he also gets into that vein of doing the sing-songy thing. Ice Cube does it too, but it doesn't have as much of a melodic quality to it. And I should note also that Ice Cube was responsible for most of the hooks on this album, so Ice Cube's hook game was very effective on here. But those are the flow distinctions there. They really follow similar structures until they add these little pockets of their own flair. Mac 10 being the most, like I said, grounded member who's gonna keep it straightforward. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 5, wordplay and bar intent. So for 3 straight to it guys, there is clever word uses here. There's simile, there's subtle metaphors here and there. I'm not gonna say there's any brilliant use of rhetorical devices here, but they slip in and out of it. I'm gonna post some of the lyrics up because I think they just do a good job of slick lyrics and visuals. I think you get a lot of imagery from their descriptiveness, and I think you can appreciate how they get to the point and find new ways of saying the same old thing. If anything, this album and the rappers could be credited with is new ways of saying the same old thing. They do a really good job of bouncing off each other on the tracks where they flow together, where they let their styles really shine, but they play good tag with each other. The passing of the mic, the relay, and the volleying is really, top notch. Like I said, that's a testament to their synergy and chemistry as a group. You could tell they put thought and effort to how they sounded together. And there's lines on here where Ice Cube says stuff like, I'm not a G, I'm not an MC, I'm an A through Z. Very clever, That's the maximum, that's the pinnacle of the wordplay level that you get on this album. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. How much wordplay did you catch on this album? Which takes us to dimension 6, which is the dimension for punchlines, poetic wisdom, and overall quotability. Here's where I argue that you'll get the closest to a full display of cleverness and craftsmanship, because if all 3 rappers are being so direct, what they do deliver is a bunch of quotable material just because they're saying things that has never been said on wax before by such a popular rap act. We had Tim Dog with his whole F Compton thing, but never rappers of this kind of prominence saying the things they were saying so clearly and explicitly, saying your city will never get respect from us again, when these things are gonna resonate. So you can almost hear the disgust in Mac 10's voice when he's saying his line on cross them out and put a K, when he was talking about West Coast dudes, playing too hard to the East Coast. Drop the accent, put your pants leg down. If I catch you with high top fades, it's just such a tongue-in-cheek way of dissing New York. Even though they directly diss New York, they use a lot of indirect, creative ways of getting their points across. If at the very least, if these punchlines aren't mind-blowing, because they are punchlines, they are amusing. Saying that Sin Dog's not even worth mentioning in the rap, or not even worth going at, is interesting. And then, you know, Dub C gets to these points where, you know, he says, he ends his line on all the critics in New York about, you know, I'm blaming y'all for messing up hip hop. I think, you know, it's those things that are super memorable. Even, you know, the talking parts are memorable, but it's really the lines. When we think about a song like King of the Hill, where Ice Cube is going in on Cypress Hill, some of the stuff that is so inappropriate and wouldn't even fly today at the time, you know, you might have got a couple laughs out of it. And so KD, the guest feature on the song Do You Like Criminals, does this thing where it's almost like comedy lines instead of rap lines. He sacrifices flow completely just to deliver these like real cliche comedy lines of the day, kind of, you know, jokes. And this is the difference between punchline rappers who know how to deliver. This is where delivery and flow and punchlines have to add up for it to be effective. Otherwise, you're going out your way to try to make this reference like, oh, you look good on these nuts. It's just like, that's the difference between someone that professionally, you know, it creates punchlines as a part of their style. Now, one thing I'll say about wordplay and punchlines, there's a lot of misogyny on this album. Keeping in mind that these were men in their 20s, mid to late 20s, a theme that we're seeing constantly throughout the more we do these albums is that the recklessness of young black males or young minority males or young men in their 20s is prominent on an art form like hip hop, because, you know, the guys are talking crazy. And for some reason, West Coast rappers, when they are doing diss tracks, they cannot resist the urge to talk about inviting other men to their genitalia in descriptive, detailed ways. You know, in East Coast, you know, down south, other regions, they might stop with an SMD, which even that I think is weird. It's never occurred to me to say that to another dude, but it's just, they always go into detail. If people remember the classic lines from when DJ Quick, Dollars and Cents, and even Cypress Hill's retort to King of the Hill, I mean, they even stopped the beat to intimate the sound of a man giving another dude head. It's just like, and Cube in particular makes the most references to, you know, homosexual activity, and he has questionable lines, like when he says, when I see Westside Connection, when I get an erection, things that just didn't age well. I've heard, you know, a couple people's, you know, thoughts on this, that it's a big thing out in West Coast street gang, prison, and hip hop culture, that inviting the man to your genitalia, you know, is the biggest insult and form of disrespect you can give to a heterosexual male. But why so much detail, bro? If you straight, why such the fascination with that as a diss? Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 7, concepts. Not a lot of direct concepts on this album, but it does get conceptual. It dabbles into conceptual territory. Songs like The Gangster, The Killer, and The Dope Dealer, they stay in that lane. All the Critics in New York, they do stay on topic. They are dissing the journalists. It's only in the talking parts where, you know, Ice Cube is saying F the city. Even the hook is pretty conceptual, shouting out all the sections. They did their homework, you know. They shouted out every borough in New York and the outer sections, like Long Island. And I thought that was pretty clever. It sounded like they bigging them up just satirically to diss them. And they stay on topic. They talk about, you know, the reason why New York is declining in popularity, why the West Coast rose to popularity, but why they're beefing in the first place, because the journalists always were saying some sneaky stuff about other regions, rapping and downplaying it, and just not giving them love on mainstream outlets like video shows and radio shows. So yeah, that's about as conceptual as it gets. And when it's time to play these roles, you know, on Gangsters Make the World Go Round, it's very clear. Ice Cube takes this I'm the Don role, and I'll get you killed, you know, I'll kill the judge, I'll pay to get you put away. And Dub C again being the aggressor, I'll kill you myself. And Mac 10 is like, man, I'm on the grind. I'm just trying to get this paper by any means. So that is the conceptual extent. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to the content dimensions. Dimension 8, externalized, which is dealing with social ills and social topics and things outside of the rapper's feelings. And Dimension 9, internalized, which is dealing with the rapper's feelings. Not getting either of that. Really, the inner feelings are expressed outwardly in the form of aggressive sentiment towards haters, enemies, and the other coast. And then, the most social commentary you get is Cube talking on the gangster, the killer, and the dope dealer in the beginning and the end, where he's saying, all these cameras going up, all these institutions, more prisons being built. I feel like I'm locked up even though I'm free. But you're not getting that in the verses. In the verses, they're just glorifying being a gangster, killer, and a dope dealer. And they're glorifying that and gang culture and violence. And do you like criminals? They're actually talking to women as women. They sound like they're trying to pick them up, take them on a date, and just be like, look, you run the risk of hanging with this type of individual. It's more about who they're hanging with than the woman and inviting them. Whereas Westward Ho is more like, you a hoe, and this is the sex we're about to have. Get in or get out. So 2 different shades of talking to women. Not the most romantic, either one. Again, the intent wasn't to make these anthems for women. They're the opposite of Drake. Drake makes songs pandering to women, and they were like, look, this is for the homies. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to the final dimension, Dimension 10, storytelling. No stories here. There's some story elements. Dub C, when he's dissing Q-Tip, he frames it as a story in the vein of the Roach from the end of the Chronic. I once knew that's all you're getting. There's story elements in the narrative parts of verses. There's no full stories here. Everything is in present tense and future tense. 10-song album. It's up to you to decide if having no stories on an album like this is a weakness or not. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Y'all know what it is. Like and subscribe to the channel. We are still building this global hip-hop community. Until then, F for Rap Critic. Talk about it while I live it. Word to meth.